first thing that I need to say is thank you so much for coming out to support all of us with this initiative. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for being a patient and kind audience. Before I start with the conversation, a lot of people have asked me why I'm doing this. So I wanted to share a couple of things about my why. And it starts, of course, with feminism. And I have said to many people that the first feminist I ever knew, and I'm sure that's true for all of us, was my mom. And we all have our own ways in which we shove forward or push forward or cajole forward our agendas about, be it equality, be it having your voice heard, be it your opinion. And I think I learned the art of diplomacy from my mother. And I realize the older I grow, how imperative and important it is that we have certain conversations. Now, this realization actually came home to me more and more, believe it or not, by reading Harvard Business Review. Because they're one of the first magazines that started talking about the gender pay gap. And that's a global conversation. When we take that global conversation and we bring that conversation into our homes, there is another conversation about unpaid work. And it is estimated in the US that if you put together the unpaid work of childcare, the work around all the work that needs to be done in a house, anyone earning even a $10 an hour rate, each household would be earning upwards of $450 a week extra. And that's really quantifying what that unpaid work is. But here's a more interesting statistic. If you take that unpaid work and you look at how it is spread amongst men versus women, the statistic for the US is that men do 38% of the unpaid work. And in India, and here I'm going to stretch that a little bit and say it continues to be in South Asian households, whether they are based in India or elsewhere, it is 12%. So we are talking about a 98% burden of work which rests on the woman. And when I add on that another layer of the kind of culture that South Asian cultures are, which are very collectivistic cultures versus individualistic. Collectivistic meaning that it's all about me, all about we, the family unit, and not about me. There is added work in terms of parent care or what have you, which gets added on there. So it becomes really important that we spotlight this conversation as a South Asian cohort, because it's only when we spotlight it as a South Asian cohort can we actually start finding the solutions that work for us within our culture, within our identity, and within us as women. Now that's my reason behind the initiative, and I'm going to shift a little bit here and talk about why it made perfect sense to partner with Anu and Prema for today. And you've all seen Anu's art, and her art exudes positivity. I think what makes her unique as a curator is that she really curates art which talks of the good things in life. They're all positive meanings. They have layers around Buddhism, and I'm really not an expert, and we're going to ask Anu questions about that. And so it really made sense that this should be something positive, because change is positive if you make it positive. Conversations are positive if you make them positive, and it's up to us to do that. And Prema, of course, has a backstory which is extremely inspiring, apart from the work that Prema does with Manvi and domestic abuse survivors. And we will get into that as the conversation progresses. Now, our media partners for the event today are the Woman Inc. I had some slides on display upstairs. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but I just want to briefly share what the Woman Inc. is about. So the Woman Inc. is an online media magazine. And that's the biggest distraction we have here. So the Woman Inc. is an online media magazine. If you want to go to the website, it's www.thewomaninc.com. They've just come out with their latest issue. It's a quarterly magazine. And I'm just going to read out what Pooja Garg, who's the founder of the Woman Inc., shared with me for the audience today. The Woman Inc. stands for every woman. It stands for joy, for freedom, for expression, and for solidarity in womanhood. Pooja Garg started the Woman Inc. as she came out of an abusive marriage. she was shocked to realize how she, without even recognizing it, had fallen into the vicious cycle of abuse. She wanted to share her story and realized that so many more had their stories too. And the Woman Inc. took shape as a safe place to share stories and to serve as a repository of information about abuse. But soon it became a full-fledged magazine with art, poetry, fiction, interviews, and articles. Pooja has also started the Woman Inc. Poetry Project, where she offers poetry as therapy workshops. She also has on-ground activities and collaborative events. Currently, the Woman Inc. is running a phone donation drive. So if you have a spare cell phone and you don't need that any longer, then please send that cell phone to, the address is on their website, to the Woman Inc. because they actually use it for domestic abuse victims who don't have access to a cell phone to call for help. And they help give them secret phones to be able to do that. Pooja hopes to mainstream, no problem. Pooja hopes to mainstream conversations about abuse through her magazine. It is her belief that until that happens, women will always be victims inside and outside their homes. And a big thank you, Anu Mahadev, who also works with the Woman Inc. and is local to New Jersey, unfortunately isn't here today. I was hoping she would make it. I think a really big thank you to Anu and to Pooja for being partners on this event today. It's a maiden event for me, like you all know, and I'm quaking in my shoes inside. So without further ado, I'm going to get the conversation started first by introducing our conversationists for today. And I'd like to introduce Anu. Anu Bhatt is an art curator and founder of The Rural Painter. Based out of Princeton, New Jersey, she visits artists in Indonesia, Vietnam, Nepal, and Thailand, offering them an international platform for their work. When she began The Rural Painter 4 years ago, she had a vision of art transcending borders and helping artists from around the world. Today, as this vision becomes a reality, she has worked with over 18 different charity galas to help raise funds, hosted numerous wine and cheese events, installed in corporates, yoga studios, and private homes. The Rural Painter has successfully traveled on several art sourcing trips, helped over 30 artists attain exposure, and continues to support charity Water New York City by donating a percentage from each sale. She truly believes that you do not choose art. Art chooses you, and encourages people to bring a piece from a different culture into their home with its positive and uplifting energies to truly enhance their environment. Welcome, Anu, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Our second conversationalist for today is Prema, and before I go into Prema's formal bio, I really do want to share, I can't tell you how positive both Anu and Prema were when I spoke to them. From the get-go, I think I just shared my idea, and it was just amoeba kind of an idea, shapeless, formless, and they were so enthusiastic and supportive. It was absolutely amazing. Prema is an attorney from the New York office of Chugh LLP. She focuses her practice in the areas of corporate law, immigration, and commercial litigation. She is admitted to practice in the state and federal courts in New York. Prema clerked for Judge Diane Clark Street in the Delaware Superior Court and for Judge Arnold New in the Philadelphia Commerce Court. She received her JD with pro bono distinction from Widener University, Delaware Law School. Prema is a dedicated advocate, volunteering, assisting, and advising several nonprofit organizations. She serves on the board of Manavi, a New Jersey-based South Asian women's organization with a mission to end all forms of violence against women. Welcome, Prema.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. My dog has settled down, so I'm going to start the conversation. So I'd like to start really, Anu, with you. If you could share with us a brief about your background and how did you really get into being an art curator? What's the story? What happened?
So I'm not an artist. My background is basically public relations and marketing in television and advertising. But the usual story, when you have kids, you can't work long hours, it's difficult to commute and travel. So I felt the need to start something of my own and have more flexible hours. So I actually began an art school in Princeton because one did not exist at that point. I was always drawn to art. So I started an art school. It was doing well till my husband came home and said, we're moving to Singapore. So I sold the art school. We moved to Singapore. We were there for 4 years. And that's when I traveled through Asia. And I traveled to all these countries, Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Japan. And I saw the amazing art, and I had a light bulb moment on these trips. And I said, someone needs to offer a platform to these artists and bring their art to the Western world. Many of them were already showing around the world. Many of them are well renowned already, but there are a lot of other artists as well who are extremely talented. So when we returned to the US, I put myself through business school, applied the modules to this idea. It seemed to make sense. Booked a ticket to Bali and Vietnam, brought back my first collection, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. And I just want to pause a little bit and talk about how you started out actually just as an art school. And then because you had gained that little bit of knowledge, or well, I'm sure it was lots of knowledge about art from that experience, you then extended that forward when you were in Singapore and you traveled. And the reason why I share that is because that's the takeaway for anyone who wants to do any kind of entrepreneurial activity. We all start small. We all start maybe with things we have no idea about, and then it just builds from there. And it's amazing to see how it snowballed into what it has. Do you have a moment that you'd like to share with us that was really important to you, either on the journey or now that you are doing what you're doing, something that really resonated with you, something that was a success story, anything?
I think we all need something to keep us going. We all have our journey, and I think it's just seeing the pleasure on the artists' faces when I visit them. They're wonderful people, and I genuinely want people to know about their work. They're supporting their families through this work. So just spending time with them in their studios. They invite us into their homes. We have dinner with them. So it's something that gives me a lot of fulfillment. I'm in touch with them on email. They know when I'm having these exhibitions. They know about today's exhibition. They know when their art has sold. We buy the art outright from these artists. So whether we have a sale or not, they've made a sale. So we guarantee them that, but when their art does sell, we give back to those communities. We go back to them, we bring back more art from them. So it's an ongoing cycle. We travel twice a year. So we've made 7 or 8 trips so far, and we hope to increase that. I love travel, and I love art, and this was the best way to marry the two.
What a lovely idea. And I think one of the things I want to share here is that I know that Anu has had her daughter accompany her on these art trips. And what does your daughter feel about this? What is her view on, my mom's an entrepreneur and she does this?
So yeah, she couldn't be here today, but Ria is 14 years old. And I first started taking her with me to appease the guilt of not leaving her behind. And slowly and steadily, she just became such an integral part of the business. She takes all my videos. She has a very strong opinion on the art that needs to be selected. And she speaks to the artist. She keeps an itinerary. When we travel, we have a full day, 9 to 6 every day. So she's up and out. We have a schedule. We meet the artists. We have appointments. So she's on top of everything. And we've reached a point where I don't think I can do these trips without her now.
That's amazing. And I think from her point of view, I'm sure it's also equally inspirational to know my mother's doing it. Has she had any conversations with you about, what she'd like to do in her life as a career or anything which is related to what you do?
No, she wants to be a doctor.
So, okay.
And she says she's just helping me out now while she's home. But her path is different. But I think just her traveling and seeing different cultures and spending time with the artists and their families, and we walk a lot on foot. Just seeing different environments and cultures has really opened her up as a human being.
And I know I said earlier that Prema has a very inspiring backstory, and Prema, I think if you could please share with us, how did you start out and how did you end up obtaining your law degree? I found that very inspirational when you shared that with me, so I would really appreciate if you would share that with our audience today.
Sure. I was born and raised in India, and very conservative, traditional family in Hyderabad. Growing up, my parents raised me to be a housewife and someone that would take care of a family and be a nurturing person, supporting a family. And I grew up with that mindset that I would have someone take care of me, and all I needed to is take care of the family. So that was my mindset growing up, and I got married in a arranged marriage, and I met my then husband, maybe 2 days, just 2 days before the wedding for the first time, and we moved here. And unfortunately, things did not work out, but we have a beautiful son who's born out of our marriage. But through that process, I had been working part-time, but I was always in the back of my mind. I knew there was something else, and I did not know what it was. Fast forward, I used to work 2 jobs because I was a single mom. And then I started working at an attorney's office part-time over the weekends and from 5 a.m. to 9 before I went for my other job. And that's when I realized that I was very good at it. I was a natural, but I was just I was doing it as a job until my boss, the attorney, turned around and said, "Hey, why don't you consider going to law school? You'll be really good at it because you're good with people." So I laughed at him when he said that the first time, because the most I had studied in India was a degree in home science, and we did a lot of things that, not to say that was not good, but I had never applied myself in an educational perspective before. So he's like, "Well, why don't you just take the LSATs and we'll see." So I just took one step at a time. When I did not have the courage or the belief in myself, I believed in him. I said that, you know what, he believes in me, so why don't I do it? I'll just take this one step. So that's how I did it. I just took one step at a time, and he became a mentor to me, and till today I'm in touch with him, and he's one of the people that I respect a lot. And if I'm a lawyer today, it's because of him. And then the whole process of, who's going to pay for it, how am I going to afford it? I had to move to Delaware, which was more affordable than New York. And I could not afford to be in New Jersey because I didn't get admission in a New Jersey school. So every step I just took a leap of faith, not on my own belief, but somebody that I believed in. Yeah. So when you don't have your own belief high enough, you surround yourself with people who can believe in you. And that's how I did it. I went to law school for 3 years full-time and worked there part-time, and that's when I started getting interested in contributing or becoming involved in advocating against domestic violence. I have been a survivor in some sense, so I felt that this area would be where I would be more passionate about, and even the degree of law would suit that mindset that I want to help people who could not help themselves. Or if I had that kind of knowledge or help when I was going through tough times, I would have been in a better position. So I wanted to help people that could not help themselves, and that was my driving factor in roughing out the 3 years of law school and braving the bar exams. But after that, I moved back to Jersey, and the rest is history.
And you shared earlier very interestingly with me that you did your law degree 18 years after you thought you'd actually completed your education?
Yes. My undergrad degree was in India, as I said, in home science. And after I moved here, and life has its own unique way of taking you through turns and twists and brings you to where you need to be. So I started, when I went to law school, it was 18 years after my undergrad degree, and I had to learn everything what normally kids would learn in high school to know about, basics of the US Constitution or even the foundation courses. I literally had to read everything 3 times before I could understand.
I can well believe that. I don't think I would get law even today. So, and you said something which I thought was really important. You spoke about how when you didn't believe in yourself, you took faith in the fact that your mentor believed in you. And then you said something about how we should surround ourselves with people who believe in us. And that really helps us in being successful in what we want to do. Is there an anecdote or a story or anything that you would like to share with how you came to that? And in life, always does work in retrospect. When you look back, it's easy to see, oh, that worked because of that. Or is there any way that today you're paying that forward with other people? I know Manvi, and we'll get to that conversation, but on a one-on-one basis, or anything you'd like to share with us?
I always try to remember where I came from. Every day I wake up in the morning and I feel that if I can help one person today, that would be my goal, right? So I always look for opportunities where I can reach out and help people. I mentor a lot of law students from my school. I'm on the board of the South Asian Bar Association, so I give back to my profession. In that way, we have, as South Asians, we have unique issues that we deal with, not just in our daily lives, but also in our professional life. As South Asian lawyers, we encounter a lot of pushback, and a lot of people don't get promotions that they should get, or the opportunities that a non-brown person would get. So, working with issues like that is one way that I feel like I can give back. And of course, organizations like Manavi and Pratham and other nonprofits that I'm involved with, I feel like I'm doing it more to keep myself happy, really.
Yes.
But in the process, it's helping others. So that's what I try to do.
And Anu, similar to what Prema's just said, when you look back at how you've arrived at the point that you are, where's the support come from?
The support, well, I'll begin with family.
Right.
There's no way I could fly off to Asia for a couple of weeks on end without the support of family. But I think it's, as Prema said, it's the community that you surround yourself with. You, as an entrepreneur, it's a solo journey. It can be lonely at times. You surround yourself with people who are there to encourage you. There are obstacles along the way. Every path has its issues. So I'm part of a number of women organizations, the Women Entrepreneurs of Central Jersey, Lady Drinks in New York, very encouraging, opening up pathways for you, just guiding forces. And at this point, I'd also like to say, the patrons who supported me, there's a line between which, your business starts as a hobby till you figure out that it really is a business. And the people who came out and supported me when I wasn't sure whether this was a viable business, they came out in droves. People really encouraged me, Prema included. So I've known Prema 4 or 5 years, so it's great to be sharing this platform with her. And all the charity galas that I've worked with, I wanted to give back as well. And just working with these charity galas and being able to give back. When the rural painter was unknown, they gave it a platform. We brought art in for auction and helped raise funds. I think it takes a community, and just something very similar to what you're doing today. I mean, I just really want to thank you for putting a spotlight on this. This is amazing.
Thank you. I mean, it's mutual admiration. I would say thank you for being here to everybody who's in the room right now. And so you mentioned about giving back, and I remember when we were having a conversation earlier, you were talking about how you actually know your painters and you work with them on a regular basis. And I think you mentioned you also have a woman painter who you work with. Would you share something about her and her story?
There are a couple of female artists that we do work with, and we are definitely partial to female artists. We do want to give them that platform. Unfortunately, there aren't that many women, but I have patrons who actually request art painted by women artists. So that's very encouraging. We do look for them. I have a couple of them right now, and we are definitely promoting their work and promoting these women as artists. And hopefully a plan down the road is to have one of them come visit the US, and we can travel with them and put a spotlight on them and encourage them in their career.
That would be absolutely awesome. And yes, please do make us aware of whenever you plan for that, and in whatever way we can, we would all love to help and support that initiative.
Absolutely.
One of the things that we were talking about earlier, and Prema was also mentioning earlier, how things are more difficult sometimes for the South Asian community. In your entrepreneurial journey, have you faced that? And if so, how did you deal with it?
As a South Asian, I've actually been quite fortunate. I don't think I faced any specific issues just being from where I'm from. Having come to this country as a South Asian immigrant, I think we do have to reinvent ourselves. It's literally like starting from scratch. I came to this country 25 years ago. So it was literally reinventing myself, adapting to a new culture, a new environment. So that was difficult. But now down the road, having built the Rural Painter, I just feel like there's so many resources available for South Asian women that I've been able to tap into. Just loans for minority women, just resources that are available to us. So I think I'd definitely put a positive spin on it at this point.
That's lovely to hear. So when you say, loans for minority women, how did you learn about them, and is there any advice you have for how women in the room who are looking for something similar can go about finding that information?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a ton of resources online, but before I started the business, I did a lot of research. The Small Business Administration has a minority arm. They have an arm called SCORE that gives free advice. Retired professionals who will meet with you and advise you free of cost. So I was hooked up with a lady who owned an art gallery in Princeton, and she used to import art from Eastern Europe. So she opened up so many paths and avenues for me in terms of just giving my business a direction, even though my art is from Asia. But it's a free resource that's available to us. Once again, last year I joined an incubator in New York City because I had brought the business in 3 years as far as I could alone, and I felt the need to take it to the next level. So I joined something called $1 Million Women, and they offer scholarships, a part scholarship to their course for women of color. So I availed of that scholarship and was able to do that course, and I'm still a part of it.
That's actually excellent and amazing both. Excellent that you were, part of the scholarship initiative, and that you knew at one point in time that you needed to do something more and you went out looking for that. So I think for all of us in the room, one of the really key takeaways here is that there are resources. There's a lot which is out there, but it's up to us to go looking for it. And it's up to us to actually sit down and do some research and figure out what works for us, and then take that next step that we need to take in whatever journey that we may be on. And yes, we're talking entrepreneurship, but I think that applies to whatever journey that you may be on. And I'm just going to link this with what you also said about you have to reinvent yourself. And Prima, when you were talking about how as South Asians we get held back, and I'd like to share a small anecdote over here about a woman who I was mentoring, and she was really struggling in her office environment with a peer relationship, because this was a person who was taking credit for the work that even she was doing, and therefore depicting himself as being superior to her, whereas they were both working literally the same desk and the same job. During the course of the conversation, we realized that one of the things that was really holding her back in telling him when he was stepping on her toes was simply that we at the back of our minds think that's not very well behaved. We don't do those things. We don't point out, don't do that. It's just not appropriate. And that's not a woman or a man thing. It's a culture thing. Our culture is all about respecting the other person's space. It's about respecting the other person's identity. And we hesitate to step forward, to say anything, when sometimes we should. And that's part of the reinvention that we need to do. Prima, what are your thoughts on that?
I think you're absolutely right. You have to constantly keep thinking about different ways how you can overcome this. I wouldn't say it's anything negative. It's a great thing with our culture that we respect others, we respect everybody, but at the same time we have to be assertive enough to do it in a way, like you said, you've developed this art of being diplomatic. That's one way of telling somebody, I'm sorry, but I don't think this is right. You can do things, you can be assertive in a nice way.
Yes.
So I think we need to find ways, and I also think that this training starts at home. A lot of us are first generation Americans here, and what we instill in our children today at home every day gives them that confidence and to go out and have this perfect blend of both, they have the respect. At the same time, they know who they are, they know how they can stand their ground, and they don't feel bad saying this is not the way it should be.
Yes.
So I think it's something that we have to constantly keep at the back of our mind, and make an effort. If you're so ingrained in the way you're raised that it becomes difficult, but I think for our next generations, it's us who can make it easier for them, and instilling them, saying you can be respectful, but at the same time you can stand your ground.
And I love that you say that, because I think one of the things that we get very caught up in, and I find myself doing that all the time, is that I find there is a duality in my mind. There is a duality when I'm guiding my children. To what extent should I tell them they should be speaking out? To what extent should I tell them they should be holding back? Is this the right forum to speak out? And first I have to argue it out with myself before I can go and have a conversation with them. And that's a common struggle. I think that's what we are all struggling, because eventually we're trying to guide our kids in the best way possible. But for us, we're in a unique situation because we are in a rapidly changing environment, like definitely not like our previous generation. And so we have to work through our own solutions before we can provide any solutions to our next generation moving forward. Now, I'm going to step a little bit now towards the work that you've been doing with Manvi and with, specifically, I think Manvi also, Pratham. Please share a little bit about that with us.
So I started off with Manvi as a volunteer. In fact, I still am a volunteer. I did the 40-hour training that is required for you to be able to work with women directly. And primarily, for those of you that don't know Manavi, we are a women's South Asian women's organization, and we assist survivors of domestic violence and other abuse, and we help them get to a point where they're empowered and they can move on in their lives independently without the abuse or the suffering that they had to go through. So the process is not that simple, but at the same time, sometimes it's just a switch in your mind where people don't know how to get out of a situation which is abusive. And sometimes women have been in an abusive relationship for so long that they don't even know any other way out. So part of doing events like this is outreach, letting people know that, hey, there is help available. You don't have to live in suffering or live in silence like this. And you can have a better life once you get out. So there are three folds to Manavi. One is the outreach. Second is the actual advocacy, helping women get out of an abusive situation and help them to a safe situation. Safety. We have a Ashiana, which is our a transitional home where we can actually house 8 to 9 women, including children, that we run on a 24/7 basis. There is also a hotline, which is run primarily by the Manavi staff and volunteers, which is a 24/7 line. So after hours, when the staff closes the office, it goes to volunteers who are available overnight, and they're all trained in how to respond to emergency situations or how to guide someone. Obviously, if it's a real emergency, we tell them to call 911.
Yeah.
But otherwise, there are ways that we can guide them to a safer place or a better situation, or maybe come up with plan A, B, C. So things like that. And the fourth part is empowering them. Once they are out of that situation, what do they do then? Some of them don't know English, they've never worked before, or that they're just so used to being that way that they cannot function on their own. So we train them with, depending on what they need, whether it's vocational training or language skills or just therapy or psychological counseling, or even sometimes marriage counseling, because sometimes it's also the underlying issue becomes that the men don't know what they're doing because they've never been told otherwise. So it's part of educating the men as well. So this is all part of what Manavi does in a nutshell. Obviously, it's very difficult to...
That's a large nutshell. But yes, for anyone, if you know anyone who is a victim of abuse, then Manvi is a great resource. And if you're looking for any place to volunteer, if you're thinking of do good resolutions for 2020, please do think of Manvi. I think we've said from even an entrepreneurial perspective, we all need support. We all need people to be there for us. And victims of abuse need that far more than anybody else does. So please do bear that in mind.
I would like to add though that it's not just physical abuse. Abuse can happen in many ways. There's financial abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's just abuse by keeping you away from everybody else, isolation. So there are different ways in which abuse can happen. So it's very hard to identify if you're not in that situation or if you don't know a person closely. So it's just up to all of us to, I think, spread the word and let people know that they don't have to live that way. So
thank you for sharing that, because you don't consider financial abuse, because I think the world we live in, we are literally the fortunate ones. We are the ones who, even if we're not earning our own money, have equal access to our spouse's money. We don't worry about how we're going to step out of the house and go anywhere if we want to do anything. And for women who live that life, it is a very, very difficult life. It is a life which is very, very isolating. And yes, some of it we just need to get more aware about, that situations like this do exist. Unfortunately, even here, when you think, oh, these things happen in India, that's literally a mindset. It happens everywhere. And we're equally responsible for helping people who may be in those kind of situations.
but the positive side to that is that when they get over that situation, they're then free. They can lead a free and happy and safe life. So that's where we want to see everybody.
Absolutely. So I'm going to have one last question for both of you, and then I'm going to open it up for the audience to ask any questions. And so Prema, when you look at your life journey and when you look at the work you do with Manvi, what's your advice, be it on life, be it on working hard, or what's your advice to our audience here today?
One thing I've already said is surround yourself with positive people. People who will uplift you, with people who will believe in you, and people who will say you can do it. That's very, very important. Secondly, develop mentors. You need mentors in your life. You can have mentors in different areas of your life. You could have a mentor for your personal life. You could have a mentor for your professional life. But you do need mentors that you can talk to and reach out. Thirdly, and most important, don't be afraid to fail. And don't be afraid to take a no from people, especially if you're venturing out into business and becoming an entrepreneur. I think it's very important to remember that failure is a step to success. So you might fail in something, but the next time around, you will do it 10 times better. So that's my advice.
Thank you. And Anu, when you look back at your entrepreneurial journey, how you started, how you actually let a thing like moving to Singapore not defeat you from what you wanted to do. And I find that very, very motivating, because we always have obstacles that come in our path, and it's about how you take that in your stride and how you make a situation work for you, rather than getting frustrated because the situation has presented itself. So what's your advice on entrepreneurship, on how to move forward, to everyone here today?
So in terms of entrepreneurship, I'd say just know your why and do something that you're really passionate about. It's a difficult journey. It's not easy. As both Prema and Supreet said, there are obstacles. You'll be beaten down. You've got to pick yourself up. You've got to move on. It's not easy. But if you're passionate about what you're doing and you know your why, that gets you through a lot of it. Definitely surround yourself with positive people. I have numerous mentors. If I hit a roadblock, I have numbers that I can call and say, I don't know what to do next. And they'll be there to guide me. So that's key. And what gets me through everything is, I think, I have my vision, and I'm laser focused on that vision. And I'm working towards that vision. So there will be naysayers, there will be negativity, there'll be people who pull you down. But if you're focused on that vision, you won't pay attention to the things that take you away from your goal. So just keep that in mind and keep going. And there's a ton of resources. They're not expensive. Just tap into those, and you get a lot of help. So it's definitely doable.
And so, when you talk about being laser focused, it does remind me of the story of the Mahabharata and about seeing nothing but the eye of the fish that he has to hit with his arrow. And that's literally it. Everything else, the naysayers, anyone who says you can't do it, it gets sidelined. You're just focused on what you want to achieve and you're working on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm just going to open it up to the audience if there are any questions. Anything you'd like to ask these wonderful, absolutely wonderful women. In this room, no question is a silly question. So,
thanks for clarifying, because all the ones that I asked were supposedly silly.
well, please ask if you have a question. You're welcome to ask.
There's a hand
Yes,
back.
we have someone who's.
I want to know what's the process to volunteer for Manvi. I tried many times, but I didn't get a response back from people. So,
Are you talking about volunteering your time or?
volunteering my time.
Okay. So with Manavi, it's very specific in terms of what you can do. Majority of the work is working with women. So the reason anybody just can't come in and volunteer is because you need the specialized training and to be able to handle situations like that. However, we do have events and other areas where you can help out. Like I was talking about Ashiana, which is the transitional home that we have. We need volunteers constantly to bring groceries or take someone to a court, accompany somebody to a doctor's office. And the women who live in Ashiana and don't necessarily have transportation or don't drive. So these are the kind of things that we can take help with. We are working to revamp the volunteer program. Last year we just appointed an executive director for Manavi. We didn't have one for more than 10 years. The board was hands-on and it was getting really difficult to manage everything. So we now have an executive director who's putting together a volunteer program. So you will see if you sign up for our emails and go on the website, you will very shortly see opportunities for volunteering.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Meeta.
I have a question for Anna. When you choose an artist, what's the criteria behind? Do you go for the established artists? Do you go and find out artists who are not able to show their artwork anywhere? What's the basic criteria behind that?
So we work with both. I have a huge resource from my time in Singapore. Singapore is like a melting pot. So when I pick a country, I do research on the country. I'll reach out to my network in Singapore and say, does anyone know artists in Da Nang, Vietnam? And suddenly someone will know someone and they'll introduce me to an art school there, and I'll reach out. And I take a look at the art. A lot of the art that I choose, I go with pre-orders when I make a visit. So those pieces I source for people. But a lot of the other pieces I choose because I wouldn't bring back anything that I wouldn't put up in my own home. So when I do pick these artists, it's something that should appeal to me. Otherwise, I won't be able to speak about it passionately and sell it here. A lot of the artists are upcoming artists. A lot of the artists are people who've traveled all over the world. They've shown their art. Many of the artists who I work with have shown in Chelsea, New York. They've come to New Jersey. And again, some of them have never left the country and they're just starting out. It's basically the kind of art that they create and whether I connect to that or not.
Rinda.
First of all, thank you guys. This was really good and very different journeys, but very inspirational, both of you. I just feel that when we look at success, a lot of times, and you touched upon it, forget about failure. And success is built by multiple failures, and most of us forget about those. I really wanted to ask you, what helped you pick yourself up from a failure? Like I heard mentorship, I heard, surrounding yourself with people, but can you think back to an instance where you failed? And really, what was it that helped you pick yourself back up?
Is that for, okay. Well, from my perspective, I can say, you really need to have those surroundings. Say I go into a show, I'll give you specific examples. I go into a show, I'm displaying my art, no one buys. That's definitely disappointing. But I have this mindset, and this is something I've developed over the 4 years that I've been doing this business. I believe that we don't choose art, art chooses us. And I've had people come to me and say that painting is drawing me, or that figure is reaching out to me. And it's been amazing to see to hear this kind of feedback. So when I'm standing there, and sometimes maybe, you just sell one painting out of 5, I truly know that those other paintings are waiting for the right home. So that's my personal perspective of, just coming out of a difficult situation. I was in Thailand in April of 2019, and that was another difficult situation. I had no idea it was going to be 105 degrees at that time. They told me in Chiang Mai it's never been that hot. Global warming is hitting everybody. But I was with my daughter. We went out in 105 degrees, and I said either we could just be miserable and say I can't do this, or we just pick up and say how can we best, make the best of the situation. So it's just, I think, developing that positive mindset for yourself. Both of us were exhausted. We were tired. We were making calls home saying, I don't know why I did this. So, but it's just putting a positive spin on it and saying, we're here to help the artists. The artists are painting in 105-degree weather. So we're just here for like 10 days. We can endure this. So it's I think, just changing your mindset.
Prema?
I think finding something that gives you hope is very important when you fail. And that is what keeps you going to the next step. You feel that there is a hope, even if it's a very small ray of hope, there is that hope. And you just hold on to it and take the next step. That, I think, is very important. And that goes to having people around you who can feed into this hope, right? They can tell you, no, you can do it. Even though in the back of your mind, you're like telling yourself, there's no way you can do this. But there is still that little hope that you have to hold on to and take the next step. And that is what will get you out of that, mindset and get you to your destination.
And I'm going to share my input here as well. So I'm often laughed at by my children because I very frequently talk of when I, in my midterms, failed a subject in school. But that's been a defining moment for me because I didn't let that define me. And we tend to do that very often. We tend to let one failure define us. And so for me, it's the micro steps. It's the saying, let's take cooking as an example. That dish was horrible. Everybody hated it. I have so many leftovers. I'm just going to have to throw it away. But then I make something else which is simpler. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't too bad. Let me try that one again. And it's a simple analogy, but you can take that analogy and you can use that anywhere you want. And it's about the micro steps. Any other questions? Yes.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested in how you price the paintings. How do you decide upon how much to pay the painter and then how much to sell it for? I mean, what are the criteria you use in terms of pricing?
Sure. I mean, the painters have their price for each painting. I don't decide what they charge. That's the value that they put on their hard work and their effort. And we're here to promote them, so we pay them in full. A lot of it is to do with the kind of framing that we put on the painting, just the painter himself, the kind of experience, the kind of education that he has, where he's shown. So a lot of it is though driven by the actual price that the painter charges us.
And do buyers negotiate with you when they buy paintings regarding the price, or it's a fixed price?
Some of them do. Some of them do for sure. But we're in this for a good cause. If I'm not working with a charity, a percentage of our profits go to charity water in New York City, because we do believe that everything starts with clean water. So that's when I explain that to people, that they're very accepting of the explanation. And when we do make a donation, they get an email from Charity Water saying that a donation has been made in their name. So that's when people are very accepting of what we're asking for.
Yes, Prachi.
So I don't have a question, but Prema and Anu, kudos to you for what you have done so far. It wasn't an easy journey. Both of you stepped out of your comfort zones, and it is easy for anybody sitting here to imagine the journey, but I know the journey was probably very difficult. Prema, you said that you had a degree in home science and then to move on to law. That says a lot about your patience and hard work. So, amazing job.
Thank you.
One last question, I think. Oh, we have a couple here. Sarika.
Okay. So I have a question for Anu. First of all, thank you to both of you. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I'm taking a lot of learning from here. So one question for you, Anu. When you, I'm sure initially brought in a lot of paintings from different painters, and some might not have sold. So how do you take the process? Like, do you just shut off with those painters, or you go back and give them the feedback and you continue working with them, or you have changed several painters, or you're stuck to 3 or 4 painters primarily?
No, we've definitely stuck with all the painters that we began with. One of the pieces upstairs, whoever was part of the art tour, the Balinese lady, that was the very first painter we began with 4 years ago. I visit him at least once a year, and he continues to paint for us till date. And I know, had we not sold any of his pieces, I just believe in him. I believe in these painters. There's a relationship that gets established beyond the art, whether it sells or not. So we've committed to helping these artists. We're in touch with them, and they keep asking me, what are people looking for? What do people want in their homes? So sometimes I guide them, but I'd like them to use their imagination and try and find someone who would appreciate what they're painting rather than the other way around.
Thank you.
Sundari.
I have a question regarding your journey. When you started off, both of you, when you wanted to do something, how did you manage yourself emotionally and like your family and your entrepreneur journey? Because I'm sure you had a pre-tween when you started and you had a child, you said. How do you balance both of it and not feel emotionally guilty that you're taking away time from your family? Like, for many of us, we come back from India, we don't have as much support over here, like other people have over here. So how did you handle that?
So for me, I looked at it, at that time, I didn't have a choice. I had to do something to bring myself and put myself in a situation where I was in a better place. For me, it was about doing something that would help me and in the process help my son. So for me, it was, the focus was on becoming something or doing something that I wanted to do. And I knew that while it was difficult when it was going through, it would at the end of the day benefit my son. And having said that, I don't think I would have done it without, I could have done it without the support of my family. So when I wasn't able to do a lot of things, they stepped in, whether it was childcare, whether it was coming and staying with me, or whether it was taking care of my son during summer holidays or things like that. So there was a lot of support that I asked for and I got it. So I think part of it is also saying, hey, this is what I'm doing, I need help, can you help me? So for us, it's hard to ask that. A lot of us find it very hard to say, I need help. So I think it's realizing you need help and asking for it.
Definitely being vocal and asking for help, because one definitely cannot do it alone. I did start off thinking I could handle everything, and you don't get very far. So being very vocal about definitely just saying, I didn't have the family close by. I created a community of friends. So we would look out for each other. You know, if the child is getting off the bus and I have to be at the art school, that's my first business, Smudges and Strokes, someone would be there to help me out. I think it's just wanting to succeed. For me, it was more of a choice. But I found that I'm a better mom and wife part-time than I am full-time. I really needed to feel fulfilled from within, and do something of my own within the limited parameters that I had. I still needed to be home. I needed to have the flexibility, and then achieve my own goals. So it's just staying up a lot at night once the kids have slept, eating into your sleep time, just making those adjustments. I used to work a lot on the weekends when my husband was able to look after the kids, so weekends were just work time for me. So it's just finding those those areas where you can devote yourself to your work full time when someone else is able to look after the family. And you definitely do need the family support, but be vocal about what you need.
Right. With that, I think we need to wind up because we are slightly over time as well. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Anu and Prema for doing this today. Anu, your art is actually truly amazing. I think each piece speaks positivity, and you can clearly see the curation that goes behind, presenting to us. It may just look like a few art pieces, but there's a lot that goes behind it. Prema, in talking to you today, I think I've learned a new dimension of how to help people. What tends to happen is we think, 2 hours of volunteering or $20 here or $40 here, and I've done my bit in this, let me adjust my halo because I've done so well with volunteering. And we don't really realize that's truly not volunteering. It's when you give with empathy and when you give to something that really matters, that is volunteering. So I, for one, have a new perspective at the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us here, because I think this wonderful audience here today, it was amazing to see so many people come and support an initiative like this. And I think we need to do more of these in our communities, and we have to empower each other, support each other.
Absolutely.
I think this is just the beginning of something fabulous that you've started. I think, the spotlight on the South Asian women is something that's required. And I look forward to attending the next event as an attendee.
Yeah. And that's a great segue for me to just talk about, what it is down the future, which is I'm hoping to do more of these events. And so I would be looking for any kind of support, assistance, venues, speakers, any ideas. And it's not necessarily art, it's not necessarily entrepreneurship, any touch point that affects the South Asian woman and the entire community is within what I'm hoping to do. So I would really look for support from everyone. One of those elements of support is please don't forget to sign the registration before you leave. And I would love for you to email or share some feedback on today's event. That would be absolutely fantastic. Thank you for being an awesome audience, and thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There are a lot of snacks and there's a lot of wine, so please have them.